I am honored to be sitting here to the right, your left, of Sarah Longwell, and to be on stage with her. I don't know if she knew what she was in for when JetBlue put us together on a flight home from Nantucket. Do you remember that?
I do.
It was a day of infamy, and I, like an opportunist and a crass person, I capitalized on it immediately and asked if she would be on one of our conversations.
You know, I actually flew out on that flight with Judy Woodruff, and they lost her luggage.
They did, didn't they?
Yeah.
It's sort of a Bermuda Triangle up there. It's, you know, it's terrible. But I'm sure everyone here knows Sarah, but if you don't yet, longtime Republican political strategist focusing on defending American democracy, founded Defending Democracy together with Bill Kristol in 2018, publisher and co-founder of the Bulwark, which we all read, host of the podcast The Focus Group, which we all listen to, or if you don't, you should. Held hundreds and hundreds of focus groups with voters all around the country. Sarah, thank you for saying yes and for being here.
Thanks for having me. Oh, thanks. Thank you, Jim Comey.
Everybody's like fan-humaning about that you're up here, and they're jealous of me, but I'm going to start with a question. Presidential elections used to be a contest between two major parties. We were a 50-50 nation, and we were arguing for the independent, so-called independent voters in the middle. Is that still true? What has happened?
Yeah, I mean, it's less about independence. Like, our politics is really scrambled now. And when I think about the coalition you're trying to put together in the current political environment, it's less about fighting for traditional independence, and it's more about thinking about how do you build the biggest, broadest pro-democracy coalition that spans from sort of Liz Warren to Liz Cheney. And there are a lot of voters in there that are sort of right-leaning independents, soft GOP voters, and it's like there's a political realignment going on. So a lot of the voters that I focus on, and to be clear, I think actually probably lots of you don't know who I am, which is fine. You don't have to watch lots of cable news or listen to podcasts. But I started doing focus groups because I had been a Republican my entire life, but when Donald Trump happened, I was trying to figure out, how do we primary him? How do we, you know, sort of eliminate this force in our politics? He was going to destroy the Republican Party and destroy the country. And so I started thinking about, I started talking to voters. I didn't understand how it had happened that America had elected Donald Trump. I started conducting all of these focus groups, and I realized very quickly, actually, that a lot of people did want Donald Trump, and that a lot of voters who were actually, you know, we're talking about people who don't vote. How many people don't vote? A lot of people who'd never voted before were now engaged in the political system, and they wanted somebody like Donald Trump. But a lot of the Republican voters who voted for John McCain, who voted for Mitt Romney, and who I identified with, a lot of those voters were unwilling to vote for Donald Trump. And so there has been this ongoing shift in our politics where a lot of these college-educated suburban voters, not just women, are sort of realigning themselves out of the Republican Party, and a bunch of new voters, and a lot of sort of white working class voters, but not exclusively white working class voters. Now there's a lot of Hispanics, a lot of black voters who are sort of realigning into it is the Republican Party, but it's not the same Republican Party I joined by a long shot. I think that's clear to all of us. They are coming for Trump. And Trump and the Republican Party that I came up in actually have very little in common, except that he's co-opted so many people who were part of the original party.
So what does that realignment end up looking like? Like, look down the road just a minute or two.
I mean, I think we're in the middle of it, and I think it's going to keep going. I don't think we're at some end point, but I do think we're in the middle of, because of just a whole bunch of disruptive factors, social media, the fracturing of traditional media, geographic segmentation, you know, entrenched polarization. There is a bunch of reasons that I think we have to, like, we're in a populist moment, and one thing that I say when I don't have a lot of time, like this is a short conversation, and I'm always like, if there's one thing that you remember that I said to you, because it's going to save you time, is that the Republican Party of Mitt Romney and the one that you knew, it's not coming back. It is not coming back. Like, something new will take the place of this Republican Party, and I don't know where it's going, obviously, but I think that you are much more likely for the person who comes after Trump to be on a spectrum of Tucker Carlson to J.D. Vance than Mitt Romney to Liz Cheney. Like, that's not where we're headed.
So you've been talking to thousands and thousands and thousands of voters. What are the pro-democracy messages that are landing?
So here's what's interesting about it. I think about democracy all the time. I think about voters and democracy. And I'm going to say two things that are going to sound contradictory, but they're not. One is voters don't care about democracy. They never talk about it. They never bring it up. They are not focused on it. And yet, it is deeply embedded inside of them, right? And when you ask voters about democracy, well, one of the negatives is that democracy, the word democracy, is becoming polarized like everything else, right? Like Republicans think that Democrats are a threat to democracy because they stole the 2020 election. Democrats think Republicans are a threat to democracy because they said that the election was stolen and then stormed the Capitol. And so democracy itself is becoming polarized like everything else when you ask people about it. But like, there's still a lot of infrastructure in people where when you ask, I've been doing a lot of, about 70% of the Republican Party believes that the election was stolen. But we've been doing a lot to talk to the 30% who believes that it's not. And one of the things that's interesting about that 30% is they are incredibly optimistic and have a ton of faith in America and its systems. They were like, yeah, well, I know it wasn't stolen because they counted it a bunch of times and I trust the system and the system works. And I think that when I say it's deeply embedded, people think of democracy as that thing we do here in America. And so I've always thought that the answer to the situation that we're in, this isn't the question you asked me, but I'm going to tell you anyway, that the solution to the moment we're in is two things. One is around leadership. I think in all of the things that you heard people talk about on the last panel, there's a lot of good stuff in there. But a lot of that is about changing some of the systems, changing primaries and ranked choice voting. And like, we need better candidates, and we need people to run who are great leaders. And actually, we've got some good leaders on the horizon. Josh Shapiro, Gretchen Whitmer, Warnock, Wes Moore. We have a bunch of good civil servants that are out there that I think are ready. I think we don't have to feel as bleak about the way things are. I think we can feel pretty bleak about the Republican Party, but sometimes I get, I'm not as interested in some of the third-party things because I think that the Democratic Party has an opportunity to be the big, broad pro-democracy coalition right now and bring in so many of these disaffected Republicans and create the incentives needed to change. Like, the Republican Party is only going to change because the incentives are created through sustained electoral defeat. And so you build that broad coalition, you got to bring people in. And I think there's a lot of Democratic politicians that are right there ready to sort of take on that mantle and can do that work. And so that, I think, creates optimism. I know I said two things, but I don't remember the first one now because I went on such a tangent.
I don't even remember either.
Yeah.
I didn't remember there were two. But I'm going to make up an abbreviation based on what you just said. GOTV is get out the vote. You're positing GOTL, get out the leaders, is what we need. Is it that simple, really?
Yeah, no, it's not, because I remember the second point.
Oh, good.
Which is that, when I said that people think democracy is that thing we do here, right? That's about America. And one of the things that Donald Trump has done that is so pernicious, and honestly, it's crazy, because one of the reasons that I was a Republican and that I came up in the conservative movement is I felt like the left didn't like America that much. Like, all they wanted to talk about was everything that was wrong with America. And I was like, no, America's the best. And I have almost, naive's not the right, I have a very earnest love of America. It might be because I have a mom who came over here on a boat and she kind of had like an immigrant zeal. The founding father stuff was all over the mantle and everything. But I think helping, if we're going to we want people to fight for democracy. We want people to care about democracy. And that means telling a better story about democracy means telling a better story about America, right? What are we doing here? Democracy is just a set of tools. I'll just say one quick thing, which is in 2005, I worked at this conservative think tank called the Intercollegiate Studies Institute in Delaware. It's actually right across from Joe Biden's house. And my boss was a woman named Christine O'Donnell. And if we're talking about throwback politics, you might remember her because she was not a witch. Do you remember that?
I do.
Yeah, she was not a witch, but she beat, in an early kind of Tea Party zeal, she beat the moderate Mike Castle in Delaware, and so then she ran against the current sitting senator, Chris Coons. And Christine O'Donnell gets fired because she's a crazy person. And I got her job.
But not a witch.
Yeah, not a witch, but wild. And so I got her job running communications there at a very young age. And my job was to go around with Rick Santorum. He had just published a book called It Takes a Family. And it was like an answer to Hillary Clinton's It Takes a Village. He wanted to be president, but he was very anti-gay. Like he was talking about, his speeches were all about bestiality and homosexuality and where we were headed. And I was like trying to come out to my parents. And I was like, this sucks. And so it's like 2005, because gay marriage is a big issue. They've just passed it in Massachusetts. Everywhere we went, gay protesters were like glitter bombing him. Remember glitter bombing as a tactic? People just throwing purple glitter at people. But anyway, I went to an event, and there was this kid there, this young girl. She was there with her 2 moms, and she had this sign that said, "My 2 moms take me bowling." And I was like, I quit. I'm going to go do something else. But in the interim, from 2005, when that happened, to 2013, which is when I got married, we went from that Rick Santorum moment to passing gay marriage. That is what democracy did. A bunch of people made an argument. They tried to persuade their fellow Americans, and Americans changed their mind. And so I think that we have to focus on persuading people. Like it just got said in the last panel that people are losing faith in democracy. Well, we better start telling a better story about democracy. We better start telling a better story about America. We got to, the 250th anniversary of America is coming up, so we got a good opportunity, I think, to make a new pitch for what it is we're doing here, which is the most special thing that's ever been done in the world. And I think that it's incumbent on all of us who are in this democracy space to encourage our leaders, right, to that's the thing, Donald, when we were talking about the reasons that Donald Trump is such a pernicious force. He says America's bad all the time, right? He's American carnage. That's what we're in the middle of. That's not right. Like, that's wrong. It's the wrong characterization of America, and I think we need to do the job of helping people understand that democracy is a set of tools through which we fight every day to make things more perfect.
So I'm going to ask you a question that
stop
I asked.
Stop me.
I asked it before and you didn't answer it, and
Sure.
And now you just said we need better messaging for democracy. What are the messages that land?
Well, I mean, I do think I answered it. I think it is this. People want to feel good about the country they live in, right? I talk a lot about permission structures because I'm in the communications business, and permission structures are about helping somebody come to something they kind of want to do anyway, right? So people want to feel good about America, and I think our leaders, right now we have sort of awash in what I'd call conflict entrepreneurs. They feed off the idea that we need to hate each other, and they understand that of the 5 dominant human emotions, fear, love, anger, greed, and sympathy, flags, that fear and anger are the 2 that drive people to action. And so they lean in on the fear and anger. And somebody has to disrupt that. That's what I mean by leadership. And one of the ways you disrupt that is telling people a positive story about what we're doing here, right? That why pluralism is so important, why free speech is so important, why America's a miraculous place. I sit in rooms all the time with people who talk about democracy, talk about how we are not special, and how, and it's all the ways that we're failing. And I agree, like in this moment, we're in a tough moment. But the way that we get out of it, I think, is to make an earnest pitch for that thing that we are doing here, because I do think that democracy infrastructure is in people. It's not, like the people I think sometimes obsess over like this message or that message, but you know what it means to tell a better story about America, right? To have somebody make that positive and affirmative pitch, as opposed to what's being done right now.
45 seconds, what's the most encouraging thing you've heard in the last month?
Oh, geez. Well, actually, so I don't know if you're talking about politics. If you look at what's happening, like just happened in Indiana, the percentage of the vote that Donald Trump is losing in primaries to Nikki Haley, who is not in the race and has not been for months, is significant. And for this election, you're not building a pro-Joe Biden coalition. I'm sorry. You are building an anti-Trump coalition. That is the biggest coalition that exists right now. And the fact that there is a self-motivated 20-ish% in most of these states of Republicans who are turning out for no reason other than to cast a vote against Donald Trump makes me feel like something is not computing in the polls, but there is an enthusiasm for people who want to get out there and say, I will reject this, I'm going to reject this.
Please join me in being a fanboy for Sarah Longwell.
Thanks, man.